Welcome back, everybody. It has been a stressful time for people working to protect women's bodily autonomy. Reproductive rights are under attack in states across the country, as well as in the highest court in the land. Here to talk about the dire situation is Heidi Sieck, co-founder, Chief Empowerment Officer of Vote Pro-Choice, a national political engagement platform connecting pro-choice voters with pro-choice champions in critical elections. We need those champions. Heidi, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Juliana. Happy to be here. Not necessarily happy to be talking about what we're talking about, but thank you for letting us have this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's so important. Let's start by talking about the pending disaster in the Supreme Court. Can you bring us up to date?
Oh, yes, there is a disaster. First of all, though, I want to start our conversation by saying to all of your listeners that and your audience out there that sometimes when you hear the words reproductive rights or abortion, you might think it doesn't apply to you. Oh, that's a woman's issue. That's a red state issue. I want to assure each and every one of you out there that where we are at with regard to reproductive freedom in the United States of America is an everyone issue. We are talking about some fundamental issues of liberty and freedom and bodily autonomy that will affect absolutely everyone. People who identify as men, young people, people who are no longer planning families. This is for you. So I truly invite you to listen with an open mind and open ears about what is actually happening in your country and get involved if you haven't already. So first of all, Roe v. Wade was a Supreme Court decision founded or decided in 1973 that does protect abortion constitutionally up to about 24 weeks. And over the course of the last 50 years, states have constantly been trying to limit access to abortion and reproductive health through state legislation. And these have come in terms of restricted laws that make it more difficult to access abortion. And now recently, particularly when Trump was elected, it's turned into a free-for-all of unconstitutional abortion bans. So what happened, where we are at right now, is that the Supreme Court has decided to take up a case called Mississippi Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health. It's in Mississippi, it's Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And it was a 15-week unconstitutional abortion ban passed by the Mississippi state legislature and signed into law by the governor. It was immediately appealed to the court system and struck down by the Fifth Circuit. Now, what that means is when it's struck down by a circuit court, it goes to the Supreme Court to consider whether they wanted to think about it or not. Now, for the last couple of years, there have been around 20 cases that have been kind of sitting on the sidelines of the Supreme Court, waiting to see if they're going to talk about abortion access or bans or anything like that. We've all been waiting to see if they're going to take one up. Now, this particular one was considered by the Supreme Court 17 times over the last year. And in May, the Supreme Court decided that they were going to hear this case. And what's scary about it is there's no reason to hear this case except to directly consider the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Because the question that they asked in this case is whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortion is unconstitutional. That's a very, very broad question, and basically is allowing this Supreme Court, which is 6 conservatives, 3 sane, rational people, that they are going to actually decide whether they want to overturn Roe. So that's what's going to happen. Now, there's 2 things I want to let the audience know, is that last Thursday, the Mississippi Attorney General filed a brief talking about their position on this case. And they said publicly what the anti-choice movement has never truly said, but now we have it written down, that their entire intent for this is to overturn Roe v. Wade and all the other Supreme Court cases that are protecting abortion rights. It was specifically written in this filing. So this is the whole play, this is the goal, and that's what's going to happen. Now, additional filings, amicus court briefs, and those sorts of things are going to be happening in September. The oral arguments will be the first or second week of November. And the decision, which means they will have to make a decision on this, will come down by next June. So this is really happening.
Mm. Mm.
I'm happy to talk more about the details of this, but I'm open to more questions.
No, this is really important. And do you think the American public, the public, not just activists like our audience and people that we may come in contact with, do you think the public knows that this is happening?
I think that they have a sense that something's happening. There's been a lot of press coverage, but folks may not really understand how it truly impacts everybody.
Mm.
So what this means is when Roe v. Wade gets overturned in June, that the states will have a decision about the way that they regulate abortion, reproductive health, reproductive freedom. And I think for over the last 40, 50 years, so much of the restrictions that have been happening in this country have been happening kind of in a small way in the state legislatures where people aren't necessarily paying attention because there's not as much media. It's just like you were saying in your headlines, there's an onslaught, there's a problem with like local media and independent media that's covering a lot of the local and state legislation and our elected officials at that level. So much has happened that the public isn't aware of or hasn't seen the bigger picture of, because I will tell you, over the last 30, 40 years, hundreds, thousands of pieces of legislation have been passed into law that are restricting access to abortion. In fact, this year, as of July 1st, this has been the worst legislative year in all the history of abortion rights. 90 abortion restrictions have been enacted, meaning passed by state legislatures and signed into law by governors, which is more than any other year, and we're only at July. So do folks know that that's happening? No, I don't think that they see or they're seeing the bigger picture. So that's why it's really important for us to have these conversations here.
Well, we're really happy that you're here with us. Given the lineup of the Supreme Court, as you said, 6-4, is there any chance that the vote might not overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, here's the thing. The issue here is the concept of precedent, which is the foundation, the core of the Supreme Court itself, meaning their role is a check and balance on the other branches of the federal government, the legislative branch, which we know has got challenges, the executive branch, which is the president, and the executive office is the president, and administrative law. So their job is to check those laws and regulations and to really be like a sober, nonpartisan, reflective.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Constitutional body. That's not happening. And now this is the big question. Precedent is underneath all of it, which means that the Supreme Court, once they've decided a law, won't decide it again unless something drastic has changed. And this is the kicker here, because what has changed in the United States of America is that support for reproductive freedom has only grown. Over 80% of this country, no matter their religious or political affiliation, don't want Roe v. Wade overturned. They want access to abortion in some or all cases. There is a vast, huge support for access to reproductive health, reproductive freedom, and abortion services. That is what is continually changing. However, there is some indication. That's why we're so concerned that the Supreme Court is taking this up, because there is no reason to, from a social political perspective, to overturn this precedent. Now, John Roberts is very rooted in precedent. We are very hopeful, and he has written other decisions and spoken about how we believe that he is certainly a person that could potentially stand on precedent with regard to this decision. Now, this is the ultimate head scratcher, quandary, irony, perhaps, is that the potential other Supreme Court justice that could be reflective of precedent is Brett Kavanaugh. So He was the one that we protested inordinately, and I stand by that. That month I spent in DC, and that time I spent in jail, in protest of that appointment. But there is a universe where these two men may decide that precedent is more important than controlling people's bodies and their decisions.
If we start seeing the Supreme Court defying precedent here, wouldn't it open a door to relitigate every law that we have?
Yes, that is, yes, absolutely correct.
That's
but
a problem.
There's some there are some past decisions that have happened in the last year with Brett Kavanaugh and John Roberts on the Supreme Court, where they have overturned some precedent on some other technical cases that had to do with like sovereign immunity or something like that. So they know how to, they're willing to do this. So
I don't necessarily mean to drag you into politics, but there's always a political motive and behind pretty much everything, it seems, these days. And the anti-choice movement, or the issue, has been red meat for drumming up support of working people to the right wing, where their economic interests are not being looked out for. Many of their other interests, their health care, poisoning the environment, none of that is being looked out for. And they have managed to use this as a wedge issue to expand their base. If the Supreme Court overturns it just doesn't seem like a smart political move for the right. And I don't believe at this point the Supreme Court is above politics.
That's right. If the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, all of this goes to the state. However, you make a very important point. This has always and forever, since the 80s, when this infrastructure, this anti-choice minority infrastructure, was really put in place, it's all just about political power. So this is a leverage of a small group of people. It's around 18% of the voting minority that is truly anti-choice, that believes that government should control people's bodies, that should be legislating regular reproductive health decisions. There's 18%, but the Republican Party and the conservative movement need that 18% to stay with them in order to win elections. And it's now even more important. So particularly at the state level, where all of this is going on, and where congressional lines get drawn for congressional districts, and governors are really seeking power in their states. This is an important issue to keep a certain amount of voters on the side of the movement, because here we just have to remind you, 7 in 10, nearly 8 in 10 American people do not want Roe v. Wade overturned. And we all know, we have that experience of wanting our own body autonomy and independence when we have to make personal decisions about our family and our medical care. When we're sitting in that hospital or the doctor's office, do you want a sheriff's deputy or a police officer standing there with you if you had a miscarriage, or if you have to decide what to do with a very dire situation with a pregnancy that may have a fetal anomaly? Is that what we want? And so that is what the fundamental question that we're facing right now.
Heidi, let's turn to Texas, where lawmakers are striving to pass a law that is almost unthinkable. We don't want Roe v. Wade overturned, but we also don't want our brethren in, what is it, the Lone Star State to have this kind of thing happen to them. Talk about what they're doing.
Yeah, which is directly related to what I was saying before. This is a fundamental perspective issue. Again, over the last 40 years, hundreds of laws have been passed, thousands have been introduced that continue to restrict abortion. The conservative movement has an amazing infrastructure of templated legislation that try out all sorts of things. When I was working in the unicameral in Nebraska, in the 90s, that's when it all started. They were just testing out all kinds of different things. Here's a new one that is just unbelievable to me. So Texas, 2021, in May, Governor Greg Abbott, a 2-term governor who's going for re-election again in 2022, signed into law a 6-week abortion ban, unconstitutional currently, which would take effect in September. This would ban abortion before people even know that they're pregnant. 6 weeks. Sometimes you don't even know.
No, you don't know.
You don't know. You have no idea.
No.
But that's kind of typical to some of these abortion bans across the board. That'll get repealed. It'll go to the Supreme Court, etc. What is absurd, egregious, terrifying about this new law is that they're trying new ways of enforcement. This law would deputize ordinary citizens, including people from outside of Texas, who can sue a clinic or anyone helping someone obtain an abortion after 6 weeks, and it will award that person up to $10,000 per illegal abortion. We are talking deputizing vigilantes to turn in people who are accessing abortion after 6 weeks or providing abortion after 6 weeks. So if I am driving a friend to a clinic, I could be sued by anyone who knows that I'm driving to that clinic. This is what's going on in Texas. This was a law signed into law by the governor of Texas.
How is this possible? I mean, how is this even legal? Is there a legal balance? I mean, they're passing laws that are illegal anyway, or unconstitutional at least. How are they doing this?
Absurd. So this is how they are doing it, is because they have a majority in the Texas state legislature and a anti-choice governor. Wow. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So of course we have to sue. So on July 13th, the Center for Reproductive Rights, Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, Texas abortion providers, abortion funds, doctors, everybody sued in the district court. But because of the structure of this particular law, they had to sue every single state court trial judge, every county clerk, the Texas Medical Board, the Board of Nursing, the Board of Pharmacy, the Attorney General. They had to sue every judge in Texas, basically, in order to make sure that this is properly addressed in district and circuit court.
Wow.
So this one is like, this is where you really see what the perspective is of this overly funded anti-choice minority that has outsized power in a pro-choice nation.
I mean, really, just the society that would
vigilantes and law enforcement to be monitoring the pregnancies of people and miscarriages of people, that it's codified in law, and that is what is happening. So
that is just horrifying, as someone who just had a baby not less than a decade ago. That still is right in, it sears in your memory, that particular moment. That it's just unthinkable, and it turns people against each other. I mean, we're talking about like people turning against Nazi. It's very Nazi-ish.
Yes, it's extreme. It's extreme.
Unbelievable.
But this has always been, now the unspoken becomes spoken. Now we know from the Attorney General in Mississippi that the whole point was to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now we know from these laws that the whole point was to control people's bodies. That's why I founded Vote Pro-Choice, is so we can look at all the down ballot races and really look at the lens of reproductive freedom, and be able to vote pro-choice in every election. So pay close attention to your state and local elections. There are 45,000 of them happening in 2021 in almost every state. So get involved. Please, please, please. VoteProChoice.us will provide you all the information that you need to vote pro-choice in every one of those elections. Secondly, obviously, we really need to be looking at those gubernatorial races in 2022. We can't give Texas Governor Greg Abbott a third term. So support a Texas gubernatorial election seriously. That is going to be very important. I think also, of course, there's going to be a lot of activity at the Supreme Court. If you really want to get involved that way, there's going to be protests and actions there. So that's a good way to just be part of the community if you want. But in the end, it really is local and state elections, vote pro-choice in every election, get involved, get informed, and we've created the platforms for you to do that.
Well, we thank you very, very much for doing that. Don't forget to you can follow the hashtag VoteProChoice on Twitter. Heidi Sieck, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad we were able to cover this.
Me too. And I hope you'll come back as things unfold, hopefully in the right direction.
I certainly hope so. Thank you, Juliana.
You're watching Act TV. Don't forget to follow us across platforms. Stay tuned for a final word.